We recently traveled to New York City to observe the International Summit on the Teaching Profession. Countries from all over the world with successful school systems come together to share ideas with each other. At the summit, I had a chance to sit down and talk with some of the brightest minds in education today. You're one of the sponsors, the National Education Association, one of the sponsors of this incredible summit meeting. Tell the folks who are watching right now a little bit about the who, what, when, where, and why.
Well, it started as an idea of, in a monthly meeting with Secretary Duncan, that what if we brought together the leaders, the ministers, and the union presidents from the countries that were doing well in international assessments. And I don't think any of us ever really dreamed that it would come about to the extent that it has. And last year, it was such a positive experience for everyone. As I talked to fellow union presidents from around the world, their reaction was so positive. And as they said, they went out to dinner together, they had informal conversations in addition to the formal, and they said, I spent more time with the Minister of Education in that 2-day period than normally I would in 6 months or 3 months. And so the level of conversation really did what we know happens when you want collaboration. You got to sit down and talk and build those relationships. Right. And the big winners are students in education.
So we're getting people who sit and talk with each other, huh?
Yes, it's really important that they have to come as teams. If the Minister of Education and the union president have such a poor relationship, they don't want to sit together, they're not invited. Because we believe collectively that if you really want to sustain change, if you really want to change what's happening in education, you must have collaboration. And if you can't sit down at the same table and talk, it won't happen.
There are folks who are listening to us talk right now, and our relationship has always been very friendly, but they say, but those unions and those leaders of education are so adversarial. So they love hearing this.
Well, and around the world, it's very different than people's perceptions here. In all of these countries that are doing so well on the international assessments, they have very high union membership, usually over 90%, and they are always working together.
At the end of this summit, you were to present a 3-point plan to move this respect for the teaching profession forward. What do you have in mind?
As a group, with the American Federation of Teachers, the Chief State School Officers, Department of Education, and the National Education Association, we had number one say what our biggest learning was and our commitment to the future. And what we said is we are going to work together and be ready for our labor management conference that we all sponsor together in May to do that. For NEA as an organization, we are doing more than we've ever done before. And the 3-point plan you mentioned, one is we've got to focus on the people coming into the profession. We lose 47% of our teachers in the first 5 years. Ooh. And to listen to some of the critics, they say it's too hard to fire the ones that are left. What I say is your system of recruitment, training, and hiring is broken. No company, large or small, could survive with a turnover of nearly 50% every 5 years. It costs too much money to recruit, train, and hire. So we need to deal with quality at the front door. We need to make sure that every person, before they ever enter a classroom as the teacher of record, is fully trained, licensed, and certified. So the second part is that we have to own the professional practice. The art of being a professional. It means that starting from day one, well, now that you're licensed, from day one, there must be an effective evaluation system, one that gives good feedback, that's tied to professional development so that you grow your entire career. And then the third point is that unions have to lead in this. We have to be able to not just fight against bad solutions, but fight for good solutions, things that we believe will make a difference for students.
So when you put all this together, I hear in some of the conversations I've had today a shift that the United States has really picked up on this idea of recruitment, training, support, and then that results in retention, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Huh? Absolutely. I've learned so much from countries like Singapore and Finland, Ontario, Canada, our neighbors just to the north. When you look at how they look at this whole system, for example, Singapore was the one a year ago made the point. We tend to look at compensation as a way of paying individual people. They see it very differently. They see it as an undergirding of a system. If you want people to want to be in teaching, you have to have a compensation system that supports that. You can't have a system that pays 1/4 of what other college similar careers that require the same kind of training.
As folks are watching us wind up this conversation, what one thing should they keep a lookout for, and one thing you want them to know?
You know, I heard the answer to this today. So, you know, people talk that often individuals are looking for the silver bullet.
Yeah.
Someone said the silver bullet is education. Yeah. Different way of looking at it. So it's not one activity or action. It's understanding that it is the system of education that ensures our country's future. Because in this global society that we now have and global competition, really the only way that we will all succeed as a nation is to invest in that education. Best return on any dollar spent. And I'm excited about that. So the one thing we have to do is ensure that our success as a future is done by investing in education today.
The silver bullet.
The silver bullet is education.
The silver bullet is education. I like it. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you, Dennis.
This is America is made possible by the National Education Association, the nation's largest advocate for children and public education. The American Federation of Teachers, a union of professionals. Punsan Corporation, forging a higher global standard. The CTC Foundation, AFO Communications, and the Rotendaro Family Trust. New Zealand has one of the top education systems in the world. To learn about the how and the why of its success, I talked with the Minister of Education. I read these big reports, and they say that New Zealand always is ranking in the top 10 of all school systems all over the world. What's the secret of success?
Well, there is no one secret of success. In order to get a system, a system of course is made up of many parts. One of it is that we have a highly aspirational culture as a society. We're a small country, we're last stop before Antarctica. We know that in order for us to enjoy the quality of life we want to have, that we have to trade to survive. And in order to do that, we have to design products and services that we can sell to the world and that the world wants from us. That means that our biggest and best resource is located between the 2 ears of our citizens. That means that we have to constantly be ensuring that how we contribute to, facilitate, manage that resource, i.e. through our education system, will deliver those opportunities for us. So we have a very strong culture or attitude of success and expectation. And then the tools that go with that. We need a national curriculum which delivers the skills we're talking about. We have to have outstanding professional leaders, our principals and head teachers. We need to have teachers themselves who in the learning connection, all the research tells us that it is that quality of interaction that drives up education. We have to have parents who expect the best. We have to have businesses that are able to identify the skills and attributes that they want from prospective employees. And we have to have a risk-taking kind of culture, of the kind personified by our Sir Edmund Hillary, who climbed the highest mountain. So you have to have risk-taking and adventure, and all of those, I think, are part of the national attitude. However, we have major challenges as well. So we need to be overcoming, some of the poverty gap. We are a bilingual. We have a native or indigenous population, of which I am one. We have many waves of settlers that have made up New Zealand, and so it's also as important to us that we maintain our indigenous language and culture, and on top of that, that we equip our students with an interest in and an aptitude for more than one language. So that's required as part of our curriculum as well.
Let me ask this question. Do you believe that quality education demands quality teachers?
Oh, absolutely. Not only do I believe that, it's underpinned by research and evidence. We know that the biggest difference that can be made to a learner's achievement pathway is the quality of the teacher they have in the classroom or in the learning space. So we absolutely have to prioritise how we both prepare our teachers, how we support them in their professional development and learning, and that's
Is that an ongoing process?
It is an ongoing process, and it does involve not only time out of school to get subject-specific knowledge, but we also have a practice within the New Zealand education system of partnering, of collaboration, of ongoing mentoring. We believe in continuous improvement, and our Education Review Office, which is a national level office, is responsible for doing annual or triennial, or if you're a really successful school, a 5-year review of how well things are going.
So when a youngster is 16 years old, what do you expect of them, for them, at the end of that period of time?
The law in New Zealand provides that students must be at school until they're 16, but typically our students stay till they're 17 or 18. What we expect is that they have mastered a range of skills that equip them to navigate the 21st century. So our curriculum is very much based on skills of thinking, of judgment, of relationship management, of communication, of analysis, and then that's applied to subjects. So we expect that they will have passed a national examination comprised of different achievement standards that set them on the pathway that they've chosen.
What percentage of youngsters who go through what we would call 1 through 12 go on to some kind of further education?
I can't give you the exact percentage, but significant numbers, and we distinguish between university education, technical education, and training for the workplace. But of all our students who graduate from high school, it would be up in the high 80 to 90% who go on.
What are you going to take away from this summit meeting?
Well, I think that one of the key themes, and it's represented in the structure of the summit, is collaboration. So in this summit we have government, we have the unions, and we have teacher practitioners. And so one of the very clear themes is the importance of collaboration, particularly if a country is looking for change. All parts of the sector need to have buy-in and want to be participants in order to make that change. Another, I think, is actually it has emphasised that all the things that we're doing in New Zealand, we are on the right track. We need to be driving further and faster, I think, because we do have an achievement gap in New Zealand, and we want to be able to pick up all students so that they have the capability to realise their potential. I think the other takeaway is that everybody is learning from each other and cherry picking, if you like, because why do we need to reinvent the wheel? If Singapore has identified a really good process to teacher preparation, why not learn from what they're doing? And similarly, if Finland has mastered how they might close more of that poverty gap, why not see what works there?
What can the United States learn from New Zealand?
Well, the United States, again, indicative in its name, is really a collection of very, very big countries. I think that we do offer an excellent world-leading curriculum, national curriculum. I think that we offer really good assessment of schools through our Education Review Office. Those are just two things that I think that are important. And the third thing I think is that we recognise that language, identity and culture are intrinsically and extrinsically important to a student feeling valued such that they can involve themselves in a learning process.
Minister, thank you for coming and a safe trip home.
Kia ora. Thank you.
A wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The Pearson Foundation promotes literacy, learning, and great teaching. I spoke with the foundation's president and CEO. What brings you to the summit?
Well, this is the second year we've attended. Teaching generally and specifically the levers of good teaching for educational systems around the world are things that we focused on. We've worked with OECD in the last year or so to try to document the practices that successful countries, strong performers, successful reformers those countries to figure out why they're doing well, how they're doing well, and sort of share their stories with others.
As you kind of sit back from the whole thing and kind of survey all of these countries that have successful education systems, what seems to be the common denominators?
Well, it's hard to identify, I think, one common denominator among all of them. There are some things that have a lot to do with this conference that have been identified. I think one thing is they all seem to care about teachers and know how to treat teachers. They do a great job of recruiting them. They do a great job of training them. And I think one of the biggest things that people have been talking about the last few days is the degree to, once you get a teacher into the system, how do you provide this sort of training and support they need to be able to come into a class and be able to succeed? And then how do they grow over time so that they start as teachers, they grow into leaders, and they can train others?
Mm-hmm. I've been told that if a minister of education will not come with a delegation that includes a union rep, they don't want them to
Yeah, that's what I heard.
here.
It's great, isn't it? I mean, it's a real change of pace. And what it does is it sort of gives teachers who I think maybe too often feel like they don't have a voice, not only a voice in their own country system, but a voice in sort of this growing international dialogue about what it means to be a teacher, what great teaching is, and how that word gets spread.
21st century, technology is huge. How does that fall into the whole education system paradigm around the world?
Well, I think one of the biggest ways technology is having an impact is it's allowing us to focus more on data. We're able to see these countries are performing. A lot of the work that OECD does is to identify the countries that are performing and give us the beginning clues of sort of the behaviors of these countries that allow us to allow them to succeed. The next thing, though, is how to be able to take that, which is really science, and apply it to the art of teaching, and where the right balance is between it. I think the concern too often is that the more you sort of provide metrics on the measurement side, the more the teaching practice itself is going to be focused on metrics. And the challenge, I think, is to get that balance right. But I do think really that it comes down to figuring out what happens in that classroom and that interaction between a teacher and a student. And there are all sorts of technologies that can improve that interaction. But ultimately, you really want to have a teacher there, and you want that teacher paying attention, and you want the teacher to be able to almost subscribe to a bigger community of teachers and practitioners just like her.
And what's the priority for Pearson Foundation?
Well, for the Pearson Foundation, I mean, we're really interested in helping teachers and also celebrating teachers, and to the degree that we can, working with other organizations to kind of get the word out about the practices that will help them, both in the classroom and for their profession.
And some of the materials are available through you worldwide.
Yeah, I think Pearson as a business obviously has a big investment in supporting teachers. What we try to do is to connect people, organizations like teachers' unions, like ministries of education, like nonprofits, bring them together to see if we can get greater consensus about what works, and then share that as best we can, because the more we know what works, the better chance we have of kids improving. You
have a feeling you're sitting in a kind of the right place at the right time?
Yeah, it's a great gathering of people, and I think the best thing about it is that there's this commitment, not only that we meet and we talk, but that people go back to where they came from and they implement, that they do stuff. And we're already looking forward to next year.
Terrific. Mark, thank you so much for coming by.
Thank you. Thanks
Thank
for your
you.
time.
I think we have also seen...
To close the achievement gap at ground level, I talked with Jerry Wiest, who's been a school superintendent in 5 states. Jerry, thank you for sitting with us.
Good to be here.
You have been the super
35 years.
In 5 different states, if I
Yeah,
add them
yeah.
up correctly. What's the headline on the article? What's the biggest lesson you've learned?
We can do it. We can do it, and we're doing it in pockets in the United States. We need to do it more systematically.
Give me an example.
Well, I find it in different places. I find places in California, I find places in the Midwest, I find places in the East Coast. But in 13,000 systems, you've got to increase the volume. So the questions we ought to be asking ourselves, how do we go to scale with quality and get the volume we need to drive our country? You know, we're only about 300 million people in a world of 6 billion or more. And we only have 50 million in education. We can't leave half of them off.
Yeah. Now, there are the haves and the have-nots, right?
The haves are doing quite well.
Yeah.
And if you take a look at our haves and compare them to the rest of the world, But that isn't enough volume to run a country like we want to. It isn't enough volume to have the country that we need to be #1 in the world anymore.
Do we get it here in the United States that the social and economic success of this country is predicated on the quality of our education?
Yes, I think we get it, but are we willing to invest in it? Not pay for it, but invest in it strategically and think about how to build that new culture of a structure that works for more children. Right now in America, economics is a great divider,
Yeah.
especially with children. Right now, race seems to be almost a proxy sometimes for economics.
Yeah.
And we got to put both those things on the table because that's who has been falling behind. Children of color
Yes.
and children who are poor. And that's half of the children that we have in the school systems.
So when you sat in Montgomery County in Maryland, and you grabbed a hold of this idea of an achievement gap,
Right?
two different worlds,
Right.
how did you attack it?
Truthfully, which was very hard. And that is put it on the table, and we showed it actually in a map of the county. We created a map that had red and green on it, and really you had to face it. And we took it out of all the flowery statistics and put a face on it. And when we put a face on it, we then had to call ourselves to action. And when we called ourselves to action, we stopped all the activities and said, what are the activities that are most productive?
Who saw the map?
Everybody in that county.
Everybody in the county.
Everybody in that county. We showed it everywhere because it had something to do with your house value, the quality of the education, and we showed a mythical house moving across that county, and if you put the same house in a different place, right across the street in some cases, the value went down $100,000.
So we got a green and a red?
Yep, we got a green and a red, and what we wanted to do is green the red.
Green the red.
Green the red, like a front lawn, and I used it like a farm person that I am. If you had a field and it was growing green grass, and some areas were not growing, what would you do differently? People would say, well, we'd fertilize it more, we would pay more attention to that area, and I said, that's what we have to do. We have to green the red zone.
So is it a question of teaching and treating all the youngsters equally?
No, it's quite the opposite.
Okay.
Equal outcome.
Okay.
You want the same outcome. You want them college and career ready.
Yep.
When they walk across the stage, you not only want them to get a diploma, you want that diploma to translate into something that somebody wants to buy. They want those kids. They want them in college, they want them in the workforce. You might have to do a differentiated way that you go about doing that in your delivery system. And we found that good teachers with the children who are most economically impacted, good teachers with the children that move around, good teachers with the high expectations or what it was going to take and reasonable class size and good resources.
I was reading an article last night about Finland.
Yeah.
And they were talking about Finland saying after the wars and such that they predicated their economic recovery on an investment in education.
And so did we in Montgomery County.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah. We're more like Ontario, we're more like Alberta, we're more like Finland.
So you were doing
Shanghai.
some.
Yeah, well, we did the differentiated resources. Well, we got out of our looking out the window and blaming people, and we started looking in the mirror. And when we looked in the mirror, what we saw was a set of structures that were causing our employees, all of our employees, to be disengaged. And even if you got the best plan, which a place like Montgomery County could get, the plan is executed by the people. And if the people aren't going to execute the plan, you've got a problem.
That's why you showed them the map.
That's why we showed them the map, and that's why we started doing things different. We embraced our employees rather than push them away. We gave them the support, encouraged them to stop the train if it wasn't working, and we started to listen to what the children needed and the future needed. And when we did that, we became the #1 graduation rate high schools in the country of all the large systems, highest AP scores, and we went even into the international baccalaureate degree, which is recognized in 1,000 different high schools across the world, and we went from 500 to 9,000 kids in those areas.
What's one thing that you would have folks take away from our conversation?
The very one thing, if I could get across to anybody in this country, we can do it. Others are doing it. We can do it too. All we got to do is the same spirit that we brought to this country in the first place. Work together and have high expectations for all of our children.
Thank you, Jerry.
You bet.
For information about my new book, The Chance of a Lifetime, and online video for all This Is America programs, visit our website, thisisamerica.net. This is America is made possible by the National Education Association, the nation's largest advocate for children and public education. The American Federation of Teachers, a union of professionals. Punsan Corporation, forging a higher global standard. The CTC Foundation, AFO Communications, and the Rotendaro Family Trust.